very good afternoon to you all. Yeah. In our previous session, we discussed about symmetric key encryption. That is, same shared key will be used both for encryption as well as decryption, isn't it? We are using the same key for performing encryption at the sender end as well as to perform the decryption at the receiver end. So there is a need to share the key between the sender and receiver in order to make this uh, what we call make this idea a successful, isn't it? Make this cryptographic idea a successful. So there is a need to share the secret key or the private key from the sender to the receiver, from the sender to the receiver. So basically, what is the problem? What issues we discussed over here is the key sharing issue or the key management issue we discussed. Okay, both the sender as well as the receiver, they have to have a trusted third party who is going to share the key between them, who is going to share the key between the sender and the receiver. So in order to do so, in order to share that key, they sometimes both the sender and the receiver, they are dependent on the secured channel. Okay, so there should exist a secure channel between the sender and the receiver, and it is the very big issue, we can say, because it is a very big nightmare both for the sender as well as the receiver. So I mean, because in this open world, nobody can trust the third party. So how far the third party is going to show us the trust, there is no guarantee on that trust. Okay, there is no guarantee on that statement. So because of that reason, what is happening means, in real time scenarios, when we try to when we try to what we call um, adopt this symmetric key encryption mechanism, we are getting hurdles, isn't it? We are getting problems, we are getting issues. So because of these reasons, we shift our attention from the secret key or private key encryption towards the public key encryption. Okay, we have seen different examples as well for this symmetric key encryption. We started with DSA, that is the data encryption, DES, data encryption standard. Then we discussed triple DES. So simply whatever problems we got at the first stage of our cryptographic mechanism, so we somehow solved all those issues in triple DES. Still, it is not a secured one, isn't it? We discussed still triple DES is also not a secured one. Then we shifted our attention towards AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. Then we also have IDEA, okay, International Data Encryption Standard. All these things, International Data Encryption Algorithm, all these algorithms, whatever we discussed, they come under the symmetric key examples because they follow. I mean, the symmetric key principle, symmetric key mechanism, that is nothing but they are going to use the same key both for encryption as well as decryption. So after that, we said anybody can easily employ this brute force attack on these symmetric key encryption algorithms. Okay, in order to do the cryptanalysis or in order to perform the cryptanalysis, anybody can easily get the key or the plain text from the ciphertext simply by programming a computer or simply by making a computer to crack that algorithm. So we said when we are performing the symmetric key encryption algorithm, the encryption algorithm, it is open to the public because they are publishing, isn't it? The algorithms, they are publishing, so the algorithms are open to the world. So everybody knows the techniques, how encryption is going to be performed and how one can perform the decryption. It is open to the world. It is known to everyone. What I mean to say is it is known to everyone. So the next thing, what is missing then? Because any cryptanalyst sitting in the public network, he can easily get the ciphertext from the network, isn't it? Ciphertext from the he's grasping or he's stealing the ciphertext from the network. We should not say stealing, because we only making it as open, isn't it? Ciphertext, we only making it as open, so anybody sitting on the network, they can easily get, public network, they can easily get our ciphertext. So they have the ciphertext, they have the mechanism how to decrypt it. They have the mechanism how to decrypt it. Then what is missing for the cryptanalyst, in the sense the key is missing. The key is missing. So basically, the intentions of the cryptanalyst also we have discussed, isn't it? There are two intentions. Either he is interested in the current message, or he is interested in the entire conversation, isn't it? Either the cryptanalyst is interested in the current message, or he is interested in the entire conversation, what the recipient and sender is going to do, or what they have already done. So, for these two situations, in the first situation, when the cryptanalyst is interested only in the current message, he focuses more on getting the plain text itself, because he is interested in the current message itself. He don't want the previous, testimonials or previous conversations, and he is not interested in the future conversations, isn't it? He neither interested in the past conversation, nor he interested in the future conversation. So he focuses more on getting the plain text for the current ciphertext only. So he is nowhere interested in gaining the key, or he is nowhere interested in retrieving the key from the ciphertext. So the second situation, where the cryptanalyst is not only interested in the current message, not only interested in the current plain text, but also he want to gain the information from previous conversations, and also in future transmissions or future conversations. Then what he will do, what the cryptanalyst will do, means he focuses more on getting the key. He focuses more on getting the key, because once he get the key, okay, once he get the key, the algorithm is open to the world, and he have the key, then he can easily employ that ciphertext along with that key to the algorithm, and he will easily get the plain text for every communication, for every conversation. In that sense, we have understood the concept of uh, private key encryption, secret key encryption, one key encryption, okay, symmetric key encryption. These are all just the different names, but the concepts are same. Concepts are same. So in today's class, yeah, we will discuss the second cryptographic algorithm type. Okay, second cryptographic algorithm type, that is asymmetric key cryptography. Asymmetric key cryptography. When we are saying asymmetric, here we are going to use different keys. Asymmetric in the sense different. Symmetric means same. When we are saying asymmetric, we will be using different keys both for encryption as well as decryption. Okay, we use a separate key for encryption, and we use another separate key for decryption. Okay, we use one key for encryption, and we use another key for decryption. So that is asymmetric key encryption, or sometimes they call it as two key cryptography, two key encryption mechanism, asymmetric key encryption mechanism, or in short, they will call it as public key cryptography. Public key cryptography. All these are just the synonyms we have given to these to this asymmetric key cryptography. So what are those? Either you can say asymmetric key cryptography, or you can also refer it as public key cryptography. Public key cryptography, or we also call it as, what is that? Two key cryptography, because we are using two keys over here. Two key cryptography. So whatever they ask you to write about in your exam, if they are asking public key cryptography, if they are asking two key cryptography, or if they are asking asymmetric key cryptography, you have to go for that this concept only. Whatever we are going to discuss in today's class, you have to explain that same concept in your examination. Hope you got it. So quickly we'll get into this asymmetric key cryptography and we see how sender is going to use one key and how the receiver is going to use a different key for to perform this cryptography. So asymmetric key cryptography, it is also known as public key cryptography. It refers to a cryptographic algorithm which requires two separate keys. Just now I have explained this one. It requires how many keys? Two separate keys. Here you can read that statement. It requires two separate keys. And those two keys we call them as one is public key and other one is private key. So for your understanding, I'm giving this very clearly. Public when we say it is open to the world. Public when we say it is open to the world. And private when we say it is completely secure. Okay. Private in the sense it is completely secure. We are not going to share even to a second person. Even to a second person. That is nothing but your receiver. We are not going to share our private key even with the receiver. Hopefully you understood this one. Private in the sense in symmetric key encryption, definitely we have shared our private key or we have shared our key with the receiver as well, so that he can decrypt the message. But over here in asymmetric key cryptography, when we are saying the key as private, we are not even going to share our key with the receiver as well. It is completely secure, it is completely secret, it is completely secret. But whereas public key will make it open, we share with everybody in the world, we can say we share with everybody, we make it open. Okay, so that everybody will know the public key, so that everybody will know the public key. So now how this mechanism is going to work when we have two keys, how we are using one key for encryption and how we are using another key for decryption. We'll have a brief discussion over here. We'll not go into the working mechanism. Okay, how the steps internally works. Those things we are not going to discuss. We'll have a brief discussion. Okay, so the public key is used to encrypt the message and private key is used to decrypt the message. So what basically we are doing is, so that I will explain. Ultimately, we are going to have two parties in the transmission. So one is the sender and the other one is the receiver. So those two I'm marking with boxes. So let us assume this is my sender and another, this is my receiver. So between that, what we do, we do have the public channel, and over this public channel only we are going to transmit the message. So here he pushes this message onto the public channel, and here he receives that message from the public channel. So this is we call it as a public network. Public network. So this is your sender and this is your receiver. Sender and receiver. So here we are making use of two different keys, isn't it? One private key and one, sorry, I should put this here. One private key. We'll discuss in detail. Don't you bother about it. And one public key. So this is public key. So what we said, public key basically we are using in the process of encryption, isn't it? Public key basically we are using in the process of encryption, and private key we are using in the process of decryption, where we are using this private key in the process of decryption. So sender, what he will do, he will make use of public key and then performs the encryption and sends that. After performing encryption, he will get the ciphertext. So before encryption he will have plain text, and after encryption he will have ciphertext, isn't it? ciphertext. Here, the receiver will receive the ciphertext from the public network, and he performs the decryption on that ciphertext and gets the plain text, actual message, plain text. So this is the entire concept. What do we have? Then, yeah, on what basis the sender is performing the encryption, and what is this public key, and on what basis the receiver is performing the decryption, and what is this private key, that we have to understand. And rest of the concepts, getting the plain ciphertext from the plain text and getting the plain text from the ciphertext, that we already know, because the same concept we discussed in symmetric key encryption as well. So what is different over here is the keys concept. Instead of using one single key, right now we are using two different keys. Right now we are using two different keys. So how this mechanism works, or how this principle works, I will give some more idea to you. Let us assume in a group or in an organization, let us assume we have like 5 people who regularly shares the confidential information, related to their tenders, or related to their company financial status, or related to some secret, what we call, um, uh, the research works or something. So these 5 people, what they are doing, they are continuously sharing some confidential information over the public network. So one way they can apply, they can this symmetric key encryption mechanism, but it is having a lot of drawbacks that we already discussed, and one such drawback is the key management. Okay, key management, and the brute force attack, it can easily break that symmetric key encryption algorithm. So we kept that symmetric encryption aside, and now we are discussing asymmetric. So we go in an assumption that these organization people, they will also opt the public key encryption mechanism. So right now, what is that public key, we have to understand. What is that public key mechanism, we have to understand. So let us assume those 5 people are A, B, C, D, E. So here, this is something like person A. Okay, then we also have the person B sitting somewhere here, person B. Then we have person C, person C. Okay, then we have E person, D person, and E person. Just to understand the concept of public key, I'm taking more people over here because we need more public keys. So D, he is our D, and then we have E. So we have another one, E. This is E. So right now, what every person do according to this public key encryption means, they will have a set of keys. A set of keys. Set, when I'm saying two. Okay, two keys each. One is public key and other one is private key. So here A is having two keys. Okay, is going to have two keys. One is public and other one is private. So what he will do, private means he will put that key secretly. Private key, he will put that key secretly. Okay, this is private. This is private key of A, and he also have one public key that he will share with everyone. That he will share with everyone. So here E will also have A's public key. Okay, B will also have A's public key. C will also have A's public key, and then D will also have A's public key. So this is public key. Clear? So next, E, what he will do? He will also have his own key. He will also have his own key. That is a private key. So this is is private key. Let us assume is private key which he maintains private, which he maintains secret. And he also have one public key that he is going to share with everyone. So this is public key, is public key, is public key. Likewise, he's going to share with everyone his secret, his public key. Then uh, B, he will also have his private key, okay, and public key he's going to share with everyone. Public key he's going to share with everyone. So all other they also have is B's public key. B's public key. So then, so likewise, every other person is going to have uh, their own private key as well as public keys of all other members in the group. Public keys of all other members in the group. Now, let us assume that A wants to send one message to B. A wants to send one message to B. So, what he will do means he will perform the encryption using the public key of B. So what is the public key of B? That is this one, green color. So he is performing the encryption by using the public key of B. So automatically what he will get? He will get the encrypted message, that is nothing but ciphertext. Okay, that is ciphertext. He will get the ciphertext, and that ciphertext he will transmit to the public network. That ciphertext is transmitting to the public network, so that we will get that message from the public network. So when the ciphertext is under transmission, rest of all they also gets that ciphertext. Okay, here the same ciphertext everybody is getting. B is also getting, E is also getting, C is also getting, and D is also getting that ciphertext. So now, who can decrypt the content of that message? All can or only B can? That means, yeah, whoever is having the private key of B, I mean, private key of that concerned message, only he can decrypt that message. Only he can decrypt that message. So right now, who is having that private key? Only B is having that private key because he is not sharing that private key with anyone. He's not sharing that private key with anyone. So in that sense, the private key will remain private, and there is no need to share that private key over the public channel, isn't it? So right now the message it got encrypted using the public key, and we can decrypt that same message using the private key. And who is going to have that private key? Only the receiver is going to have the private key. Neither the sender is going to have that private key, isn't it? Nobody can have that private key except the receiver. So once that ciphertext the receiver will receive, he will simply decrypt that message using his own private key and get the content from it. Likewise, let us assume A wants to send a message to C. Again, what he will do? He will also follow the same logic. He will use the C's public key in order to encrypt that message. So once the message got encrypted, he will send that message to the public network, and that message delivered to everyone. But only the receiver can decrypt that message because he only having the suitable private key in order to decrypt that message, and others they cannot decrypt that message. So even the sender, when he is sending the message, after generating the cipher key, without the private key he cannot decrypt that message. Without the private key he cannot decrypt that message because he's having the plain text with him. So he maybe not he maybe don't need that decryption process, but even he also he cannot decrypt that ciphertext because he's not having the private key of anybody else in the group except his private key he's going to have. So in this way, the public key encryption mechanism works. So public key encryption mechanism, it uses two keys. One is public key and the other one is private key. In order to perform the encryption, we use the private key, and in order to perform the decryption, we use the no, sorry, in order to perform the encryption, we use the public key, and in order to perform the decryption, we use the private key. So Yeah, this public key encryption mechanism, it was originally invented by Diffie and Martin Hellman. Okay, okay, Diffie and Martin Hellman in the year 1975. The basic technique of public key cryptography was first discovered in the year 1973 by the British Clifford of Communication Electronic Security Group. They call it as CESG of Government Communications Headquarters, GCH headquarters. But this was a secret until 1997 because they have invented some new concept and they don't want it to be published openly, and they want to utilize that mechanism as long as as long as it is going to satisfy their needs. So they invented in the year 1973, but they kept this mechanism like a secret until the year 1997. And in the year 1997, they made it as public. They made it as open to the world. They made it as a standard, we can say. So as you can see here, if yeah, public key cryptography, we make use of public key in order to perform the encryption and private key in order to perform the decryption. So here you can see plain text. Yeah, plain text, we performed encryption. Yeah, we have a group of people, and to whom you want to send that message, you are using the public key of that concerned person and performing the encryption, and you are sending that ciphertext to that concerned person. And yeah, even if the message got delivered to rest of the persons in the group, only the concerned person can open that message and can see the content of that plain, I mean, encrypted message, because he only having the private key of that particular ciphertext, that particular encryption mechanism, we can say. So the next thing, yeah, as you can see, step one, what we have to do means give your public key to the sender. Okay, give your public key to the sender means if you are in a group of senders, simply share your public key with that group, because sharing the public key doesn't going to harm the mechanism or doesn't going to reveal the message, confidential message. So simply what we have to do, we have to share our public key to the group. Okay, then the second thing, what the sender uses the public key to encrypt the plain text. Okay, suppose the sender wants to send the message to some X person in the group. So what he does, he uses the public key of that X person and encrypts the message and creates the ciphertext. Okay, here you can see sender's message, sender's actual message, and using the public key. And suppose the sender wants to send the message to you, he's going to use your public key, isn't it? So we are assuming in that way. So he's using your public key and encrypting the actual message or the plain text. So what he will get after encryption means he will get the encrypted ciphertext. Okay, encrypted message or the ciphertext, and he sends that ciphertext. You can see sender gives the ciphertext to you. That means he transmits the ciphertext to you. Then what you are doing, yeah, using the private key, using your own private key, you are decrypting that message and getting the actual plain text. This is your ciphertext, and you are performing the decryption process using the private key and getting the plain text. So in this way, we are performing the what we call asymmetric key encryption process. So the examples for this asymmetric key encryption are the digital signatures. Okay, digital signature algorithm or digital signature standard, we can say DSS. Okay, digital signature algorithm. So generally what the signature will do in real world, so whenever we have some circular or whenever we have some what we call notice from the university, we check for the valid signatures on that document, isn't it? We check for valid signatures on that document. So suppose in your college, if a circular has been issued, means in order to make that circular authentic, what we will do, I mean what the management will do means they will put this principal signature on that document, isn't it? So once the principal is doing the signature on that document means it will become authentic. Okay, that circular will become authentic. isn't it? So that everybody is going to follow the statement, whatever is written under that circular. So in that similar way, in order to make a particular document authentic in electronic world, so in real world we are using signatures, but in digital world we don't have any such type of thing, isn't it? We have to have even if you put the signature, anybody can forge that signature. Simply what he will do, he will take that signature from your document and he will put that signature on other document, and he will make some false statement as an authentic one. Because signature copying, if you put the handwritten signature on a particular document, signature copying is very easy in the digital world, that you know, that you already know. So what we do means, instead of keeping the handwritten signature on digital documents, what we do is we use digital signatures. Okay, digital signatures. Very soon we are going to understand how these digital signatures will work, because it is too early to explain that concept over here. That is why I'm simply giving the idea of what is digital signature, and very soon when it comes in our syllabus we will discuss in detail how these digital signatures can be implemented and how they are going to make a particular document or a particular file authentic. Very soon we will discuss. Maybe in this class only I am going to explain. Okay, we have another concept, and over there I will try to explain. This digital signature standard concept is developed by US National Security Agency. Simply they can say NSA, National Security Agency, to generate a digital signature for authentication of electronic documents. Whatever I have explained, the same thing is this particular statement is explaining. So to make the digital documents authentic, they have invented the concept of digital signatures. Okay, so this DSS was made like a standard by the National Institute of Standards and Technology (NIST) in the year 1994. Okay, in the year 1994 they made it as a standard. Okay, in order to make the electronic documents authentic. Okay, Federal Information Processing Standard FIPS also have given FIPS also has given a standard for this DSS, digital signature standard, under 186, their reference under 186. Okay, so next we have this RSA algorithm. It is also an example for public key encryption algorithm. Okay, RSA stands for Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman. Okay, these three what we call cryptographers, because they have done some study under this cryptography, so we are calling them as cryptographers. Okay, so Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman, they first publicly described this RSA algorithm in the year 1977. Okay, and they called it as RSA algorithm. It is the first algorithm known to be suitable for signing as well as encryption. So, as I said, public key encryption mostly helpful in order to perform the digital signatures. So, this RSA algorithm is also used in signing the documents, and not only signing but also the encryption process. And one of the first great advances in public key cryptography, this RSA was the one of the first advent, we can say, one of the first advancement today towards this public key encryption process. Okay, so after its invention, this RSA was widely used in electronic commerce protocol. Okay, protocols. Then we have Elgamal. It is also one of the public key encryption algorithm. And the encryption algorithm, it is similar to Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. Very soon we are going to discuss what is Diffie-Hellman algorithm, and it is one of the important algorithm from your second unit, we can say, because in the second unit we are going to discuss symmetric key, then after asymmetric key. So under this symmetric key encryption, we come across this Diffie-Hellman key exchange algorithm. Again, when we are saying key exchange, whenever we are saying key exchange, we are going for private key, because in private key only we have the concept called key exchange. In public key, there is no key exchange, that we already know. So this Elgamal algorithm, it is very similar. This Elgamal we are not going to discuss. We are discussing this as an example for public key encryption. So this Elgamal, it is one of the example for Diffie-Hellman key, sorry, it is quite similar to Diffie-Hellman key exchange algorithm. Okay. Mm, So next is we have hash functions, the third type of cryptographic technique or cryptographic algorithm, that is hash function. So it is very simple. This hash function, what it does means it will take the variable length message, whatever size, whatever length, and whatever number of characters you take inside the message, it will take that message as an input, and it will apply a kind of hash function on that one. And after applying that hash function, it will yield, or it will give a fixed length output, a fixed length output. So suppose your fixed length size is, let us assume we have 54 bit. Okay, quickly we discuss this also. So let us assume we have a hash function. So we says one side is arbitrary length, that is variable length. So message, it can be input, it can be arbitrary length, and output, it will be fixed length. Output, it will be fixed length. In between we are having the hash function. What we are having? Hash function we are having. We are giving input to this hash function, and we are getting output from the hash function. So whatever cryptography or whatever encryption we are performing, with the help of this hash function only we are performing. So input, it can be of any size, so variable size input. But the output, it is fixed size. Fixed size. So let us assume you are giving only one bit of input to this hash function. Only one bit you are giving. And what is the output? If you have standardized your output size as, let us say, 32 bits. If you're standardizing your output size as 32 bits, then whatever input you take, for every input it will give the same output, 32-bit output only. And that too, it is something like what we call morphed, or what we call scrambled text. It is not the actual text what we are passing. Even if you are taking some 1000 bits as an input, 1000 bits as an input, if it will give the same output, that is 32 bits only, because it is, we said, fixed size output. We said fixed size output. So that is the advantage of employing, or that is the advantage of using this hash functions. Okay. So hash functions, a cryptographic hash function is a hash function that takes an arbitrary block of data and returns a fixed size bit string, such that any change to the data will change the hash value. So whatever output we are getting after performing the after applying the hash function, we call that output as hash value. We call that output as hash value, hash code, digest, or simply hashes. We have different names. Okay. The return value by a hash function, in the second statement you can read that one. The return value of the hash function, we call it as hash value or hash code. We also call it as, then we call it as digest or simply hashes. Okay. So uh, th- all these things are fixed length. You have to remember, we are going to get fixed length, no variable length concept over here. Whatever output you give, 1 bit output, 1000-bit output, you will get the fixed length output. Okay. The values used to index a fixed size table called a hash table. Okay, this we are going to discuss in your fifth unit, the hashing mechanism, and how we are going to use the hash values corresponding hash table index as corresponding hash table index. All those things we are going to discuss in your fifth unit. Okay. So this is a simple figure you can take as a reference. Over here, what we have done, the message M, it is of arbitrary length. Arbitrary in the sense variable length, no fixed length. No fixed length. So message M we are giving to the hash function h, and we are getting hash value small h. Message M we are giving it to the hash function capital H, and what we are gaining means hash value small h. So here this M is of variable length, and h, it is some function. Basically it is something like an technique, we can say. When we are saying function, it is something like a technique only, because what we are going to put inside the function in your coding is the logic only, isn't it? The logic. So then we have then we are getting the hash value, that is small h, and it is of fixed length. Whatever message you give, whatever size message you give, for all messages we will give the hash value as a common size value, fixed size value. And even a single change in the message, even a single bit change in the message will make a drastic change in the hash value. That is the advantage of using these hash functions. That is the advantage of using these hash functions. And these are the basic, these hash functions are the basis for digital signatures concept. Very soon we will understand that one. So as you can see over here, in the first case, to that cryptographic hash function, I'm giving the input as fox, a simple fox, and I'm getting a different digest over here. Okay, of fixed size, of fixed size digest I'm getting. Fox, single 3 character word I am giving as an input to this hash function, and I'm getting how many characters? These something 20 plus 20, 40 characters I'm getting. Isn't it? 5 fours 20, 5 fours 20. So 40 character digest I'm getting. So next, this big message I'm giving, the red fox jumps over the blue dog. Okay, jumps over the blue dog, and that same message I'm giving to the cryptographic hash function, and you see the digest of the same size, the digest of the same size for the for this cryptographic hash function. Next, again one more message we are giving with a single character change over here. What is that? The red fox jumps, instead of we kept u over here. In over, this u we have changed to u, the blue dog. And this small change is changing almost all the bits in the digest, isn't it? Almost all the characters in the digest. So this is one of the advantage of using the hash functions. A small change in the input will change drastic, will show drastic change in the digest. Okay, again 2 characters we are changing, one more different digest we got. 3 characters we are changing, another different digest we got. So like that, no single message in your mechanism, no single message in your system is going to have same digest. That I mean to say, same digest. Okay, so what is a hash function? The ideal cryptographic hash function has the 4 main properties. It is easy to compute the hash value for any given message. Simply you apply that hash function and you will get the hash value. It is infeasible to generate a message that has given a hash. Okay, so from the hash it is impossible, almost impossible to generate back the input message. Then why we are using this hash function means simply to perform the authentication, simply to perform the authentication. After this I will explain you some real time example where these hash functions are used. With that you will understand the importance of these hash functions. Okay, it is infeasible to modify a message without changing the hash. So both, in order to match the hash with the actual message, what we have to do, whenever you are doing the change in the message, according change has to be done in the hash also. Then only the message change will become authentic. Message change will become authentic. If you are doing the changes in the message and not changing the hash, then what the recipient will think means whatever message you are sending, as it is generating a different hash, because a minor change in the original message is giving an entirely different digest, isn't it? An entirely different hash. So if you are doing the changes in the actual message and not doing the changes in the hash value, not doing the changes in the hash value, after applying the hash function, the recipient will get a different hash code, a different hash code. So he will confirm, I mean, there is no confirmation that the message is authentic. Okay, he simply denies that message, or he simply not going to accept that message. Clear? It is infeasible to find 2 different messages with the same hash. It is almost impossible, we can say. It is almost impossible that two different messages in the system are going to have the same hash codes. So these are some of the properties. These four are the properties of your hash function. So every hash function, in order to give a standard result, has to follow these four properties. So the advantage of these hash functions to understand, let us take an example. So we used to download some softwares from the internet, isn't it? Like, let us assume I want to download Mozilla Firefox from the internet. Mozilla Firefox from the internet. So the most probable and opted way is I have to visit the Mozilla website and I have to download that what we call backup file for the software from that Mozilla website, and then only I have to install that software into my computer, isn't it? Into my computer. If I download the application from some third party website or some untrusted website, then there is a possibility that the application may carry the viruses or worms or trojan horse or any other malware softwares, malware programs, isn't it? It is our internet, it is completely public and it is more threat prone, we can say. Whenever we are downloading some applications from the internet, there is always a risk of getting the viruses, or there is always a risk of getting the malwares into our computer. And once you download those viruses, those malwares into your computer, the problems we know, we will get many different issues, many different problems. And sometimes what will happen, our complete system will crash because of that viruses, isn't it? Because of those viruses. So the best way of getting the applications are from the website only, from the genuine website only, from the authentic website only. So let us assume, due to some reason, uh, that particular website got blocked in some region of our country, some region of our country. So let us assume the government of India has banned that Mozilla Firefox in the India. Okay, downloading that Mozilla Firefox from the Mozilla website in India. So what we do, we have to depend on some third party websites in order to get that application. Already we know that the Indian government, they have banned the PUBG Mobile, isn't it? PUBG application. So what we people are doing means we are downloading the APK files, or we are downloading that software related files from other third party applications or third party websites, isn't it? Because Play Store, it is not showing right now, and App Store, it is not showing right now. So we are downloading the same application from different alternative websites. So who will give the guarantee that whatever application you are downloading, it is authentic or not? So in order to cross check your application is authentic, we have to go for the checksum. We have to go for the checksum of that application. Okay, checksum of that application. Checksum in the sense the hash of that application, hash value of that application. So if your application is authentic, when you apply the hash function, it will give the valid checksum, isn't it? It will give the valid checksum without any errors. It will give the valid checksum without any problems. So whatever actual message has, I mean, whatever actual application has given the checksum, or whatever actual application has given the hash value, that same hash value you have to get when you are applying the hash function on the downloaded application. Clear? So this will give the guarantee if both the hash values are same, the actual hash value of that application and the downloaded application's hash value, if both the hash values are same, if both the checksums are same, we we can clarify, I mean we can confirm that the application whatever we have downloaded is authentic. Clear? Or if you have downloaded an application from a third party website and it is having the virus in it, and it is having the virus in it, the virus is nothing but some modification in it, isn't it? Some modification in it or some addition in it. Then what will happen? You will not get the appropriate checksum when you perform the hash function, when you apply the hash function. You will not get the appropriate hash value, the same hash value what the website is displaying. So over there, you can confirm that the downloaded application is having some virus in it, and you can simply delete that one, because making change to the actual data, making change to the actual application will give you a drastic change in the hash value, a major change in the hash value. So with that, you can confirm that whatever application I have downloaded is not authentic, and you can simply delete that application. In this way, in order to um, make the stuff authentic in digital world, we are utilizing these hash functions. We are utilizing this hash function. Hopefully you understood the three different types of cryptographic techniques or cryptographic algorithm. One is asymmetric, and then we discuss, so first we discussed symmetric, then we discussed asymmetric, and finally the hash functions. So these three are the different techniques of performing cryptography. Hopefully you understood. If you have any kind of doubts, any sort of doubts, you can ask me at any point of time. I'll be ready to give the replies. I will be ready to explain the concept to you. Okay. uh, yeah, do subscribe my channel to get the updates, to get the latest videos on your alerts, and do like the videos if you feel them as um, uh, informative. Okay. Thank you, students.